Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Safety and Government Operations Committee meeting. In attendance today we have myself, Chair of the Committee, representing the 4th District. I've got Preston Lewis, representing the Office of the President, and Tyler Schinella, representing the Mayor's Office. This afternoon, the committee will have a hearing for 23-0203R, informational hearing on BG&E and forestry, for the purpose of inviting representatives from the Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, BG&E, and the Baltimore City Department of Recreation and Parks to discuss BG&E's approach to tree trimming and tree management when maintaining power lines and related equipment. This bill was introduced on December 4th, 2023, and it was sponsored by myself, of course. To begin, we all know that trees are, of course, incredibly important parts of the environmental infrastructure, and when properly nurtured and cared for, can not only live for years, but also impact our lives in so many ways. In 1991, the Forest Conservation Act was enacted to mitigate the loss of Maryland's forest resources during land development. That act made the identification and protection of forests and other sensitive areas an integral part of the site planning process. Tree fanatics like myself emphasize the care and mitigation of the loss of trees for a myriad of reasons: residential economics, health and well-being, the urban heat island effect, and that's just to name a few. Baltimore City's Forestry Division does indispensable work to plant new trees, to maintain existing trees, and to determine if and when tree removal is necessary. BG&E historically has been a great partner in tree care and growth, even recently providing thousands of trees to residents in partnership with the Arbor Day Foundation's Energy Saving Trees program, which encourages folks to conserve energy and reduce energy bills through the strategic tree planting. However, sometimes BG&E and Baltimore City Rec and Parks disagree about whose tree is whose. More specifically, city residents have complained to my office that there is sometimes a back and forth between BG&E and Rec and Parks on who is supposed to maintain certain trees and properties, especially those that contain power lines. It's my goal with this informational hearing to determine how to patch communication issues, clarify what should be happening during these disagreements, and to ultimately ensure great city services for all of our constituents. So with that, I'm going to actually turn over to Rec and Parks, and we'll start, I believe, with a presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Sam Suh. I'm the acting city arborist here representing BCRP's Forestry Division. So today I'll provide a brief overview of forestry operations as they pertain to maintenance of the canopy and how we collaborate with BG&E. So in all, we have 120,000 trees inventoried, and that includes trees in the right-of-way as well as parkland, and this does not include trees in our natural forested areas. So those are the trees that are within our jurisdiction and that we routinely provide maintenance for. The primary way that our work comes in is through service requests, and on average, we're receiving over 6,500 service requests from the public, as well as city staff requesting work on city trees. So during our operations, we're maintaining trees for health and structural integrity and removing trees when they become a risk to the public. So with that said, the work performed in close proximity to overhead electrical wires is performed by BG&E. So the two ways that we are typically working with BG&E include routine maintenance work as well as emergency work. So in routine maintenance work operations, we work closely with BG&E to ensure that any work performed on city trees is aligned with best practices. So when there are prunings needing to happen along wires, we are providing permission to do that pruning. And when there are necessary removals, we are looking at those on a case-by-case basis to ensure that those are required removals. For emergency work, when there's down trees and down power lines, We're typically clearing the way for BG&E to get out there and be the first responders, make sure any work that needs to be done to make the location and site safe is done prior to forestry coming back and doing any cleanup work of any remaining woody material. So with that said, if there are any questions about anything I've covered, please feel free to reach out to me directly.
Thank you, Sam. We're going to keep moving along, and I understand BG&E also has a presentation. Either or, you can present from your seat or from the podium, up to you.
All right, good afternoon. Firstly, thank you for inviting us today on this hearing about tree trimming and tree management in Baltimore City. We're excited at the opportunity to discuss and share information on our process and the safety importance of vegetation management. BG has worked to bring safe and reliable energy to service to communities for more than a century, and our commitment to electricity reliability goes beyond maintaining poles and lines themselves. It, of course, extends to the trees surrounding our overhead power lines. Trees are a valuable asset, as you said, Councilman Conaway, in our community's landscapes. They help the environment, and of course, they add beauty. But as we all know, unfortunately, trees can be a major challenge in providing that reliable and safe power. Trees are indeed one of the major causes of power interruptions. So preventative pruning around aerial power lines is vital to providing that reliable service. Our vegetation management crews are trained in proper agricultural pruning techniques and consider the species, growth rate, and location in the tree in relation to the overhead wires. Other factors such as health of the tree, site conditions, and regulatory requirements also guide our assessment prior to our trimming projects. I'm going to turn this over to one of our senior vegetation program managers, Nick Valentine, who's going to present to you on BG's process, our practices, and our alignment. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Valentine, and I am a senior vegetation management program manager for BG&E, and I've been a certified arborist for 34 years, and Maryland Tree Expert certified or licensed for 20 years, and I've served on the Maryland Arborist Association board joyfully for the last 18 years. So I just want to jump into this. Let's see here. These are some of the questions that came up. What lines are what? Construction ID I'll go over. And then just a bunch of questions here. So these are the ones I'm going to address here. I'm going to move through it fairly quickly. I think this is the most important one, and I apologize, I have to move around.
If you could just make sure you keep
sorry.
to it so that folks
Thank you.
can hear you.
So I put two diagrams up here of what is in question, and the reason I brought this up was just from listening to the conversations and being the one who goes out and talks to the constituents in the field once these questions come up and there is concerns on different things. I think once I get the opportunity to explain something simple as what are BG&E's electric lines and where our high voltage is and where we are responsible for, by the 10 minutes into the conversation, and maybe even sometimes 5, once I identify the communication lines, which is telephone and cable, which are the lower ones, and that's where usually the vegetation question is, they understand that that is out of our jurisdiction, basically, as far as taken care of. We will assist in certain things in certain areas, which I'll go over here in the future. But again, so the top wires are the higher voltage, and then the second set of wires just underneath those transformers in both pictures are secondaries. But that now you're looking at 240 volts, okay? And then the rest is communication lines. And again, that's where most, I'd say 90% of my questions come in. And then once I explain it to the customer, they understand. But that obviously wouldn't probably be a city situation. Then it becomes either a Verizon or Comcast type thing. So Maryland High Voltage Line Act, again, I'm not going to read through that. Basically, it requires us to go to give a 10-foot circle, if you may, just to simplify things, around our wires in a situation where it is a crane or a derrick, which is basically one of those machines that just digs holes for the poles. That has to be 20 feet because those booms are not insulated. Where we assist. Okay, so first part is where I'll go out, or maybe one of our contractors, Davie Resource Group, will go out. We'll do a field inspection once we get a request in. Option one is when we go out there, for us to decide, you know what, this is within the 10 feet, we got a trim, cut, or treat, which is herbicide treatment, to the specifications 100%. If somehow something slipped through the crack during our maintenance cycle, or we might find out, because sometimes constituents call about not their property, and we might have a refusal going on with that property owner, and we're working it out via real estate and all that. Option two is to trim, remove with a contractor assist, meaning we'll give the 10-foot of clearance, but then the property owner has to have get a private tree care contractor to do the rest of the work. And option three, which we do sometimes on, if you go back to that, and I won't go back there, but there was what's called a house loop, and that's from the pole to the house. We'll actually drop the wire for them, de-energize it, and then let them have their private tree care company come in. So there's three options there. We can charge. There are utility companies around the world that do charge, but we don't feel that that's a good partnership with our constituents, so we don't charge for that. That's a free service.
Do you mind?
Yes, sir.
If you could go back
Yep.
one slide, just
Which-
explaining the difference between where you guys trim and cut 100% versus you drop the house loop wire and allow a private contractor to do the work.
Sure. Oops, sorry. So we have, one of the questions is do we have a plan? We have a 4-year cycle that we go on every year. That's part of RM43, which was going to be some of the next slides. And we have a specification depending on what the voltage is. So there's higher voltage, sometimes 34 kV, and then there's lower ones going down all the way to 240. So to make it simple, on a 34 kV line, we trim 15 feet to the side, ground to sky, blue sky as we call it, because of the potential, not only for the outage, but potential of how many that would affect. As opposed to you get down to the secondary wires where I showed you that 240 volts, now you're only interrupting 1, 2, 3 folks. Okay, so that is maybe a 4-foot circle around that, okay? Does that clarify that, or? Okay. So again, just to keep this moving along here, RM43 was a law that came into effect several years ago where we have to do certain things, basically put together a plan, and then we, like Danielle talked about, we have to consider the species. Once the species, it tells us the growth. So just a quick example would be if you have an oak tree, okay? Now let's use a mulberry tree. A mulberry tree can grow 3 to 6 feet of regrowth in 1 year. A spruce or an evergreen is going to grow 3 to 4 inches. So again, to work with our customers, we don't use the same spec on every tree, because obviously you want an evergreen tree. If you just come in there and take a bigger bite than you need to, it doesn't work, right? So here's an example of our 4-year schedule. So this is me in the city, Central District. I know what feeders, all the way to the left is a feeder number. It's assigned as far as identification. The next one is substation, and then where it's coming out of. So this is the city area. Who's assigned to it? I'm the vegetation manager, program manager. Who the contractor will be for that year. And then you'll see the X marks what year that will be trimmed. And again, that's where we were mandated with the RM43 to come up with a plan. So we do have a cycle, we do have a plan. Every once in a while, if there's a large storm or something at the end of the year, it might push something from the 4th quarter to the 1st quarter, but we get it right back on track. Questions, or you're good for now? Okay. The next part of that is you can actually go on the website, any constituent. You can go on the website, and I pulled this up because I think it's a great little graph, is you'll see those different colors are different feeders that are scheduled for the 24 trim. And what you can do is oops, hi, sorry. I clicked on one of the feeders, and it'll show you Q2, so it's the 2nd quarter, which will be April, May, June of 24, what the feeder number is, what substation is coming out of, and it'll show you the area that it is. So literally, if a customer lives in the Erdman area, they can see, oh, okay, they're coming in the second quarter. I'll wait till they get here if I have any questions.
A quick question
Yes,
about
sir.
that map. I noticed it doesn't have the entire city sort of planned out. Is that for any reason, or?
Yes, great question. So this is just for 2024.
Got it.
Okay, and I miniaturized it. It actually has the whole BG&E territory, but I just want to focus on the city today. So you'll see things planned in only 24 for their Carroll County and so on and so on. Okay, and then each year, about December 15th, they'll update this to what 2025 will be, and you'll see the feeders that we're going to trim in 2025. Good question, though. Thank you. So customer-owner interaction. So one of the things, too, that I've heard come up during these conversations is who owns who's the property owner? That is the key for us. We have to speak and notify the actual property owner. We can't talk to the renter can't sign for that. We have to talk to the person who owns the property in order to do the tree trimming and the removals. For a tree removal, we actually have to get the signature of that property owner, which is why we interface with Scott and the team. We have to go out there, look at it, and he signs off that it's good to go, type thing. We have to make sure that it's within the ANSI trimming standards, which Danielle spoke about, and the DNR standards. So for instance, if we were to trim a crown of more than 25% of that crown just to get the specs that year, we actually have to offer to the homeowner, the property owner, a chance to remove that tree at no cost to them. And then they have the opportunity to say yes, or they have the opportunity to say no, I'll deal with the way it looks, but I want some type of tree left there, type thing. All tree removals require a signature, which I talked about. And then is, again, with our relationship with BCRP, if we're being proactive when we're going out in the cities, we have notifications persons for our contractors that will go out. They'll look at the property. They'll look it up on our GIS system. They'll make sure they've got the right property owner. If they find out that obviously it is BCRP property, then obviously we will reach out to Scott and his team and make sure that we go through the proper process that Sam talked about earlier. And then the opposite side is if we've got an emergency or they have an emergency, they'll call us and say, hey, can you get over here and take care of us, type thing. Here's the cards that we leave with the customer, not only for proactive, but also for storm restoration too. And basically what the storm restoration says is, hey, we had to come, we had to do what we had to do in order to get restoration done and electricity back on. And then the biggest thing there is just that, hey, it's your tree, you own it, you have to clean up the debris. We have to move on and try to get as many people back on into service as we can. And again, this is just storm response. This is up on our website if you need any more information on that. And thank you. That's my name and information. Hope I stayed close to the 8 minutes. Are there any additional questions?
No, that's super helpful.
Okay.
I, of course, have questions, but that was very helpful. When we get complaints, typically they're through a one request. Sometimes they may come otherwise. Are there designated point people between Rec and Parks and BG&E that manage those requests and communicate on whose responsibility it is once it comes in?
Okay with me? Okay. So what usually happens is we'll get the request first. BG&E will get the request first, just because that's where they're going to look. Everybody assumes before they get this education that it's on the poles, it's immediately a BG&E or electric situation. We'll go out there, like I said, either myself or one of our contractors, Davie Resource Group, will go out there, do the inspection, come up with what's going to go on. If we do find out that it is on Parks and Rec property, we'll get in touch with Scott. If it's not, then we go back and we'll we'll let the homeowner know, or we'll let that constituent who called in, if they're not the property owner, know that, hey, we did the investigation. It's either one, done to specs, or two, we're going to do something, but three, we might have to get in actual touch with the property owner. So we always get back to that customer who reached out to us first, be it just a normal, we have different levels. We have PSC, okay, we have GEA cases where Danielle and her team and I interact quite a bit, and then we have just a general to-do where somebody calls in and said, hey, can you look at this type thing?
There's been a couple of instances where there's been disagreements on who's responsible. How do we tend to settle those questions when they do arise? And
I actually don't think there's been a disagreement with us. I think it's more of the Verizon and Comcast. So.
When we say disagreements, are we saying disagreements between BGE and city agency, or give me an example, because from what I understand is that there are many times where a customer may reach out and say, well, I called 311 and 311 said that it's a BGE pole, right? It's a BGE's responsibility. That will then come from your office escalating, saying, hey, please, can you look into this? At that point, I will send out a notice to our GEA priority, and it will inevitably get to Nick. Nick and or his team will go out to check on that. We'll notice if it is indeed a BGE responsible or if it is a reliability issue. Many times, customers and constituents may see some vines on lines, and it might turn into an aesthetic issue, right? So there's no reliability. And if it is not on our line, so let's say it's on a communication line, we like to send that back to where it came from, right? So if it comes from a council person's office, we'll say, hey, this is a telecommunication line. You might want to reach out back to the city. When I say that, it's like, well, back out to your agency, right? So so then you guys can make the next step to kind of connect them to where the telecommunication that it may fault into. With Rec and Parks, I think there's not much of a disagreement. I will say that sometimes I may reach out to, or we may reach out to BCRP and say, hey, what do we do here? And usually a couple of gentlemen in this room will say, well, actually this is the step, and it's not us, or it is on the line or touching the line, so BCRP will not touch it. So not much of a disagreement, but more or less the same question that you have, well, who's going to be responsible for that? And many times it may fall on us if it does, right? We'll take care of that. And sometimes it might fall on communication.
Yeah, and I think it sounds like the policies as they've been sort of defined, or at least explained here, they generally make sense, and I generally understand it. Of course, I've seen instances in which there was a disagreement, and I guess the real sort of seed of the question is how do we make a decision to resolve it? Because ultimately, there's a constituent on the other end that, my office or any of my colleagues' offices are trying to resolve their issue, and there's an answer out there waiting. We just haven't chosen which one it is. How do we make those decisions? Like, do we flip a coin?
I think it really is, it's going to be a case by case. Okay. So it's really difficult to say here today with our BCRP colleagues of whose responsibility it is all the time. There is some clarity that we probably both of our organizations need to have on even private trees versus customer trees, right? Where, we have conversations with BCRP, and we recently had one this week or last week. So we do have our communication to try to learn what's going to be the next step if a customer is saying, hey, the trees and the vines are growing outrageously in my back, right? And they are touching the lines. They aren't causing any reliability issues, but we want them pruned. So to me, that sounds like you want maintenance. It's more of a beautification. We will not do that. And so it's because we are legit a electric company, right? Or excuse me, an energy company. We want to make sure that we have reliable service. And so our reliability in our service and the power is what is most important to us, and the safety thereof. So for beautification, that's not really our forefront. We do have and Nick, keep me honest, we do have a request for those who do want tree trimming. They can put a request in, We do have that, that's also on the website. But when it comes down to beautification, I think that's kind of where it's an issue, to say, hey, where does BCRP step in? Because if it's reliability and it is about energy and it is about safety, we all the way will try to take care of that to make sure that the community and the customer is safe.
I think that's an important distinction, actually. I'm curious, Rec and Parks, anything to add here, forestry? And how we sort of look at these issues when we have complaints from constituents. And I can certainly see an instance in which there is vegetation with proximity to a power pole or line, which technically we might say we don't make cuttings around there, but I'm kind of curious if anything to add to.
I can just add something regarding vegetation on city property that does not fall within BCRP jurisdiction. I can say as a division, we do our due diligence, and we have working relationships with folks who manage properties at city property from other agencies, and we will follow up if we do discover it's not BCRP property, but there is a tree issue there. And sometimes it will end up that we do the tree work on behalf of that other city agency, but we do follow up and make sure those issues don't just go unresolved.
Does forestry at all go into private property when there are utility issues or BG&E? It sounds like sometimes for BG&E it depends on those lower lines. How do we deal with sort of those issues?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. Could you repeat that? Sorry.
Do either of you go on to private property? And you're welcome to sit in one of the chairs here, and you don't have to keep getting up. Do either of you go onto private properties when there are instances that those private properties are, trees on said private property have an impact on either power lines or the right of way, blocking access to an alley, who knows?
Yeah, those are really typically the only instances when a branch or tree originating from public property blocks an alleyway or a road. We will address that.
During the last budget season, one of the things that I pushed very heavily for was $250,000 to help with tree maintenance across the city. Did you guys ever receive that money? Has it been put to use? Do we have a sense for what impact it has made on our backlog? We talked about it earlier today, which is 2 years or so.
I'm not aware that we've received it. Are you?
I would have to follow up and make sure.
We can reach
understand.
out to our fiscal officer and get back to you this afternoon.
Yeah. Tylor, would you please help with that regard? I can tell you, as fortunately, one of the greenest districts in the city, that also comes with a lot of maintenance around trees, and certainly a lot of my constituents have concerns about tree maintenance of street trees and trees in the right of way. And if we're not maintaining those, it does have an effect on the community.
Absolutely. I don't know if we'll get that to you this afternoon, but I will ensure that you get that information.
Yeah. Give me a second, just making sure I have all my questions answered. You guys did an excellent job answering a lot of them in your presentation, so thank you. I think that's it. I think we're good. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, there will be disagreements, and that's okay. I want to make sure that we have a speedy way to respond to constituents and ensure that, especially in instances where power is involved, nobody wants to have a tree fall during a storm that takes out their power. That's just really inconvenient, and I'm sure you guys don't want to deal with it either. If you can get ahead of it, I think that coordination between you guys is really important. One of the things I did really appreciate, and I'm curious for forestry if we have something similar, is that sort of proactive 4-year maintenance plan. I know forestry, we had a tree inventory for the entire city. Do we have a proactive maintenance plan for the city that would correspond with that data?
Yes, we do proactive pruning on a neighborhood basis, so we do have a schedule of sorts that we can share.
Sure. And how often do we expect to at least put eyes on each tree across the city that we are responsible for? Is that, I mean, it may not be every 4 years. I'm realistic here, but do we have a sense of how long that is?
Unfortunately, we don't have a cycle sort of standard. As you might imagine, a lot of the crews devoted to proactive maintenance can be diverted on storms or reactive service requests. So it really does fluctuate. So it's hard to estimate.
Do we still maintain our tree inventory?
Yes, we are overdue for a redo to update that data. So we are working on that solicitation now to get a new contract in place.
I want to encourage you guys to consider, in doing so, knowing the power of data, and of course, we've come a long way, considering some sort of proactive pruning schedule, using that inventory data. Even the old data, I think, is incredibly useful. We have everything down to, maybe 5 years ago, caliper and tree species, which is incredible. I remember I used that data regularly, just out of curiosity. Now, should we update that? That would be really, really helpful. But I think what's more is we should be using it for our operations, and especially when it comes to coordinating with BG&E. If we know they're going to be in those neighborhoods doing some of those trees, we can let them, have their space and plan accordingly. I think that coordination can be really, really helpful. So I just want to encourage you guys. I don't know if there are any plans to update that inventory. I know it's pretty pricey, but I do want to make sure that even though we have old data right now, that we're using that to be more proactive, or at least more forward-thinking about maintenance of trees, so we can be a little smarter and more effective. I don't have any further questions. I really want to thank you guys for coming in today, and didn't want to burn too much of your time. This is an issue that's sort of been nagging at me, and you guys know I'm the tree guy, so I'm going to be consistent, and I want to make sure that we are thoughtful and accountable all the way through. Is there something you want to add? Please.
Yes, firstly, thank you for being the tree guy. We all know that you are the tree guy, and you are also the energy guy, so that's really really warming. Energy being for Climate Act, right? So I just want to say I agree that there are opportunities, and I see and welcome more opportunities for both of our organizations to work well together and proactive. So thank you so much for bringing us both together again. And also, as as you close, I want to say I thank you to BCRP and your crews, right? And for our crews as well, those who are in those buckets, and they are up there changing and doing the pruning and making sure that they keep the community and the city safe. I think a lot of times we see lights and we see trees and we see power lines, and we kind of forget that we have these people out there who are working really, really hard to make sure that we keep our energy energized and our people safe. So thank you to you and your crews, and for all BGE Exelon workers, if they're out here watching, thank you very much, and be safe.
I want to make sure I give an opportunity. This is a resolution. If there are folks that wish to testify and are joining us virtually, please use the raise hand function, and we'll afford you that opportunity. And if there are any folks here who wish to testify, please feel free. Seeing no testimony, our testimony is closed, and I want to thank everybody again for coming out, and look forward to continued communication, better coordination going forward for our constituents. Thank you.